The Big Sale Illuminati, where some of the best in the business discuss what's worked, what's working, and what's failed in selling big sales. Our panel of experts includes Clarity Seeker, a black belt of brands, our snarky marketer, Monique de Maio. CEO to CEO selling is his game. Fortune 500 in his lane. The Lex Luthor of the close, Mark Kennedy. The effective executive, a force on the boards, a buyer on fire, Tiffany Olson. David versus Goliath selling, the prince of process, Sun Tzu of big sales strategy, Tom Searcy. And that's your panel. Now it's time to talk about big sales.
Welcome to the Big Sale Illuminati. Today's conversation is going to be about sales compensation. I have with us the snarky marketer, Monique. We also have the Lex Luthor of the close with Mark. And of course, the buyer on fire, our own Tiffany. So we're going to talk about sales compensation, money. I want to start off by I love going back to Charlie Munger, but I looked up the actual quote that he had. And his answer was, show me the incentives and I will show the outcome. In sales compensation, we talk a lot about incentives. And I want to start off with everybody that's listening. We're going to talk about what's not working, forward, future looking, what will be working, kind of being in development right now. And then we're going to talk about this idea of life balance sales compensation, which is really kind of interpreted underneath the umbrella of ideas, but really important if we're going to look out, even more than 12 months, because life compensation or life balance compensation is so important. But I want to toss up ball. What is not working in the area of sales compensation?
I'll start because I think that anything that becomes complex does not work because it's too difficult for people to figure out what behavior they get paid for. So, you've all heard of the thin blue line. Well, I like to call it the straight green line, which means you have a straight line from your comp plan that goes directly to the behavior that the sales person can actually figure out how they get paid. That is great compensation. And that makes money for everybody if the plan's done right.
I want to interject just a story from my history. So I was back maybe 40 years ago, and my dad was a field sales rep. He was a territorial sales rep. And then he was in charge. He was VP of sales. And for some reason, he said, a compensation plan for salespeople, commission structure should be enough that when they leave the front door of the prospect and they hit the front door of their car, they know how much they're going to make. Now, granted, at that point, you were using an abacus. He was a little older. But the point being is that simplicity point that you're talking about. It's got to be simple.
I was just going to say, I have two stories from each extreme on comp plans that I have been involved in. First one is kind of the sad story. So I just started a new leadership job and I was talking to two of the reps and I asked them, explain the compensation plan. Neither of them could do it. I said, how do you make money? And neither of them could articulate on the plan. Then I knew wrong plan, wrong structure, our results were awful, and I could trace it right back to people didn't know what they needed to do. And then on a good side, I went into a company and we had just done a new compensation plan and I was a sales manager. And one of my reps, Tom, to your point, before his hand hit the door of his car, he knew exactly what he needed to do, what he needed to sell. He put it in an Excel grid. His name is Larry Johnson. Absolutely fabulous rep. And he also then shared that with the rest of the team. So he could figure out immediately in the account, he would actually start, filling out this grid. Because he knew if he got so many things on the grid, he maximized out. So that is a sign of a good plan.
I've got this picture of Larry sitting in front of a prospect saying, hold on a second. I've got to go ahead and figure out the rest of this calculation.
It's a little bit too much casino for me. So Tiffany, when you're sitting on the buyer side of the house, how real does the sales compensation system come through to you? Do you feel it? Do you experience it? Do you talk about it?
As a buyer, no, because I'm not that concerned about what the other person is getting paid. I'm concerned about the price I'm paying. For me, what they get paid, I don't really have that concern.
So Tiffany jumped topics. She went to what does work, but really the question on the table right now is what's not working today. Although her answer is, I don't care what generation you're in, how many years you're ahead or behind, complexity is not going to work.
So this episode, preparing for this episode, was akin to me for the dental procedure we talked about ahead of time, which I had all my teeth replaced. I hate messing with sales compensation, and I have to do it. It's an absolute necessity of my job. But I mean, I could have gone on this by myself forever. So I'll throw out a couple of things. The first thing that doesn't work today is the one person commission model. So you basically take a person that's the sales lead and you assign them to a specific pursuit, and they're the one that gets paid on the whole thing. That model itself it's lazy thinking. It doesn't work, but it permeates the type of business to business sales that we're all participating in. I think, and you guys can react to these as you want, but I've got about 7 or 8 of them. The second one is I have what I call the excessively low salary to motivate, with quotes around it. So it's the starve people because somehow there's an inherent mistrust. And that's I think the real thing I get spun up on with a little bit with sales is there's so much emotion tied into business and tied into strategy and behavior. It gets very, very, I think distilling it down to a set of incentives and behaviors is such a challenging thing. And it creates a lot of trust barriers in terms of assuming positive intent.
Let me interrupt for just a second, because that's the old world was a lot of lone wolf hunting, right? More transactional, more smaller size deals. If you were selling grain, cars, anything that was somewhat commoditized, you were rewarded for volume, truly number of hours worked. And you would be given a very nominal amount of salary, or you would wind up getting, a de-escalated base versus draw over time. And then you'd have to earn your way back. Deal by deal, bit by bit, all on my back. I make all the money.
Yes, that's right. 100%. I think the next thing I'd throw out is, and this is more of a statement of my own, like everybody fits into businesses in different ways. And I happen to fit into early and mid stage growth, mostly tech companies that are services business to business. That's what I've done pretty much mostly my whole career after I left the world of analytical instrumentation manufacturing. So I've been in these kind of business services and solutions games for a while, and they've been companies that have been founder-led sales that were trying to mature to sales-led sales. And that's where you get a lot of scars on your back. And the first one I would say around that area is no factor for the cost of customer acquisition. So a salesperson can pull upon almost an unlimited amount of resources in an organization and be wildly disruptive. And that person would get the same commission on a closed deal as the person that basically worked within the realm of the sales support engineering team, closed most of the qualifying and scoping themselves, and brought home a gross margin deal that was equivalent to the other person's. But when you look at the acquisition costs, they're wildly different on the performance of the business.
That issue of acquisition cost, and I think it was covered by another podcast that's friends of ours called All In, and they call it CAC, right? Which is the cost of acquisition of a customer. And that piece, when they're looking at valuations of companies,
Yep.
part of what they look at is what is the ratio on what you just said, the CAC cost, and can they run the parabolic curve, right, of trying to figure out who in my system is fitting the highest and lowest CACs. So I think that piece right there is really insightful. I'm curious how you chew through the data and the information, because if single person compensation, sales compensation, that's easy. I mean,
Well, I think that's part of what's not working, right? So from my lens, what I see as a marketer that's working predominantly with marketers that are held accountable for the pipeline. And I find that really interesting. Well, we can dissect that a little bit more, but there's a game of the KPIs on the sales side are not matching the KPIs on the marketing side. So the fact that we don't have one view of the customer or one view of success in an organization is a real serious problem. So that's the first thing. We have to distinguish between prospects and suspects. And unfortunately, some of these compensation plans are giving incentives to getting suspects. So what do you do when it's like clickbait, right? Don't get me a prospect, just get my widget to click. It's fake, right? A suspect is fake. A true prospect takes time, energy, and effort to bring in. But why are marketing people held accountable for a pipeline that they can't actually affect? They can affect bringing the customer to the front door, but they can't affect the sales process beyond that point, right? So if the organization is using metrics and is using automation tools and metrics and KPIs and all of those things, and third-party software overlays all over the place, the tech stack looks like, somebody's club sandwich at the deli. It's so layered, but you don't have insights as to where you are with that particular prospect that is now a customer. So one of our clients works for a very large global electronics firm. We won't name names because I know it's going to get beeped anyway. She has MBOs that are 40% company goals and 60% individual goals. She told me her individual goals, they were layered on top of a faulty strategy the year before, which was all about getting leads. But you know what they were giving away to get those leads? Free trials. That's like tire kickers. So now you're going to overlay your comp plan on top of a previously very poorly executed and thought through strategy. And that's going to be your metric. She's trying to bring in qualified leads, and now she's getting judged on what is suspect, not a prospect. What Tiffany said before is interesting. She doesn't really mind how that person is compensated. So I have an opposite approach. I want to know how that person's being compensated because I want to know what they're pushing and why. Right. So if they get a bigger compensation, because to sell me the combo platter to use, let's say the services are bundled and, whatever. And I may not even feel that push, but if I ultimately know they're going to, or if I have leverage, right? If I have negotiating power, knowing that KPI or that goal is tied to something they're trying to sell me, I'm going to play it.
Sure. You know what else that comp plan will tell you? When the last time you're going to see that person is.
That's right.
You're getting your breakup agreement right in front of you.
Right. Wait, get this. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the fact that, so this same person had 3,000 leads in the pipeline, and they did a corporate restructure, and the 3 people got laid off. Those 3 people were assigned those leads. They turned off their emails. Guess what happened to she was like, wait a minute, you can't turn off their emails. Now we have 3,000 people in the pipeline that are assigned to these folks. If they leave, they're dead to us. Oh, we don't care. We'll reassign them to you. Wait, I'm in marketing. What do you want me to do with 3,000 sales leads?
Close them. Sorry. I'm sorry. Wrong hat. Put on a different hat.
But I think it does get down to that simplicity, my clear green line, that as long as people can figure out how they're going to get paid, whatever that company is going to pay them on, that is the behavior that will happen. And it will happen quickly. And if one person figures it out, they're going to let everybody else know. So I think it's really sometimes difficult to know what that measurement should be. Especially if you've got more than just one person on a team, you've got services and you have other things that happen. It takes a long time, and it takes a lot of working and tweaking. That one example that I told you of when it didn't work, it took years to try to figure that out. And then I would say, I don't know if we ever got it right as much as we got it better.
So here's something else that doesn't work today. So I get to sit on both sides of this aisle. So I run the revenue side of our business. I also run the product and delivery side. So I have to I'm judge, jury, and executioner for both sides of the house. And what doesn't work today is we wind up hamstringing the operation of the business and some of the strategic choices we make because of the commitments we have to make in a sales comp plan.
Right.
So, for example, we just recently did a big program with a leading credit card originator. And we did a trial program with them. The trial program went terrific, and they went into full production with our program to basically generate new accounts booked. And the sales lead on this account had negotiated the price, negotiated the terms, and gotten all the way through with the technical buyer and the representative from procurement. They then went into formal T's and C's with final procurement. And at the end, based on what the customer was signaling from a volume perspective, procurement came back to our contracting people and said, hey, we want a 5% across the board discount when we hit these thresholds of performance, to which they agreed to it. Well, that 5% cut across the board that this other party agreed to, now he works for us, but he agreed to, cost the salesperson 20% of his commission.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Oh, yes. So it's just the way the structure of our comp plans are set up to incent people to hit the right types of I mean, I don't really care about revenue. I care about gross margin.
Right. That's another conversation.
And so the point about it is I literally spend a tenth of my emotional energy, of my intellectual energy, getting the damn systems to line up to a comp plan that I put in place for a business that has a product that is evolving. And that's a really difficult thing to do. And what I wind up doing more often than not, and this is kind of there's another balance that doesn't work, and that's the balance between like what I call owner greed and owner guilt. Because if you're trying to build a business, you have to transition out of owner-led sales. Founder-led sales is the path to a $15 million business. You show me a business that's $15 million bucks, I'll show you a services business, and I'll show you a business that's got founder-led sales, and the guy or gal can't get out of their way. So when you're trying to build and break through and you're building this sales-led sales team, you ultimately have to pay people. And it's that balance between, like I said, the founder greed. It's my company. I create the value. My leads are the ones that generate the most value. My solution is the one that's the reason this person could make money. Therefore, they don't deserve commissions. Every good lead that comes through the door, I get to take. As you can tell, I've lived this for about 30 years. So, and then on the other side of the house, which is, oh my God, I've got to build a system that scales and a sales team that scales. You got to pay these people. And if you don't see people getting paid, no one else is going to believe, because you're really trying to create a belief set. All compensation, I think sales compensation systems boil down to belief sets. Do the people that you're bringing in believe that you're going to live up to the tenets of your program? And that's tough. It's really a tough one. But so the point about it is I spend a fair bit of my time managing the levers in the business in and around how the comp plans actually work. Because, I mean, without new business, we're dead.
The thing I was going to say about what Mark said, and I'll kick it over to you, Monique. Founder-led compensation. A lot of the clients we work with, founder-led compensation. And even when the company starts to grow beyond the 15 million, I think that's a reasonable number. They look at every dollar paid to the sales team or salesperson or new customer acquisition. They look at that as money taken away from them, because before that, their CAC was just them, right? And now they're paying for that which they could do, have done, and can do better. And so the calculation of it becomes that greed, that saying, mine. And so we know that you're saying founder-based, process-based, individual player-based. We've kind of talked about all of those issues as maybe either starting to not work or have not been working for a while. And Monique, you were going to take us somewhere.
No, and I think it's actually a better segue now. Thank you for that. I think it's the way compensation should work, especially if it's founder driven or a privately held company. It really depends on the size of the organization. So when I was acting CMO and CRO for one of my retained clients when I first started On Demand 25 years ago, I was, bringing revenue in for them, but I was compensated on an interesting formula. Funny, I say interesting because I was the one that made it up. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll incentivize myself to do two things. One is to build your top line, but also to manage your projects and create a better profitability ratio for you. So we'll have a sliding scale compensation on the top line and then the net profit of every job I bring in. That was a very effective formula. This was actually, it was a small company. sub small 10 million. And I have some examples of clients that are sub $50 million companies that are doing it right, in my opinion. But to Mark's point and to Tiffany's point, in different ways, it's about the belief system that this is the right plan, that it is possible, right? That it is easy to understand. Very simple. Top line, sliding scale. Bottom line, sliding scale. The more profit you have in the job, the more you can pay me. So nobody gets upset, because if the founder's making more money ultimately by bringing me in, why would he be upset about giving me a percentage of more money that he's
But Monique, I got to push a little bit on this. When we increase the complexity of what we're selling and we're adding to it the number of people for a larger sale, we start off at the very beginning, individual based. And then the people have to have a lot of trust that net profit, because they don't have a lot of control over it. Cost of goods sold, G&A, all the rest of that stuff. So now I've got a team of 3 or 4 people, engineers and delivery people and tech people and et cetera. We're all on a team. We're trying to close a big piece of business. We get paid on the top line. And then I look down at the bottom line. I'm like, where is that?
Yeah, I mean, so that's just the point that I was making, was it depends on the size of the organization. You can't play that game that I'm describing when you're a $1 billion, $2 billion, $5 billion company. You just can't, right? Because the salespeople are so far away from what's being spent and the net profit and so many things.
Well, plus just the complexity of administering a program like that, it breaks down pretty quickly.
I think, if you can get close to maybe a gross margin percent, or you get by with it with pricing tiers that allows people within a certain tier to price, so that you do protect your profit. One, it's hard for companies to know profitability per customer. That can be very, very tough, and your accounting systems and everything else make it very, very difficult. So I love when I can, pay people on profit, but again, they've got to be able to have some levers that they can pull to make that happen.
Let's play a real scenario. So all of us deal with people that are trying to grow their businesses. Let's take $100,000 annual contract, add a zero, make it $1 million annual contract, a $10 million annual contract. All right. And let's talk about what's fair compensation. Everything's just a modeled piece. So we use 100,000, and I'm got a minimum of 3 people on my team. I've got the front end salesperson. I've got some technical subject matter expert that's in there. And I have the ongoing delivery person. Call them what you want. You go up to 10 million. You may add in your CFO. You may add in a couple of other technology experts, whatever. It scales up the number of people because of the complexity. At 100 grand or $1 million, how do I build a comp plan if I'm just either a sales leader, or how do I know if I'm a person going into a sales position, whether it's Mark's position and your comment, whether it's safe, fair, real?
One quick thing that I would ask is it net new business or is it renewal? Your installed base, like your installed base, you shouldn't get compensated in the same way when you bring in a net new, what they call it, net new logos in technology. That's what you want, right? But ultimately you want growth in the existing accounts too. So you have to incentivize your salespeople to uptick the existing installed base into new services or new products or both. And then you got to get your net new, which is more difficult.
So retain, grow, new. I've got three pieces that I got to hold on to.
Listen, it's always the same 3 strategies, right? Acquisition, retention, and growth. Anybody who tells you differently is bullshit.
This is your binary approach. It's either this or that, really, honestly.
There's things will happen in three swim lanes, right? The swim lane is either acquisition, the swim lane is retention, or the swim lane is growth. Is that not accurate?
Let's call it $1 million. Big sale, Illuminati. Let's call it $1 million sale. How do we build that?
The answer to your question is 100%. It has 100% to do with what's the cost of goods sold. Like, what is the gross margin that generates? Because you can have $100,000 a year SaaS contract is worth more than $1 million low margin industrial good, right? It's 100% what your cost of goods sold in the deal is. Like, what is driving? How much gross margin are you?
I'm going to make it even easier. We've decided on what for our business is the cost of goods sold. We've decided what our G&A is. And so now at the end of the day, there's now $1,000 worth of compensation or $10,000 compensation. What's the ratio that should be given to anybody who is a part of that? I've laid it on the tray. It's a smorgasbord. Who gets to put how much of what on their table?
I was told there would be no math in this podcast.
If we agree that what we said in the past was individual lone wolf hunting is for big sales is gone or going. So now we're going to have an ensemble cast, a smaller or larger group of people, and they should be incentivized as to.
Doesn't that get handled with the company goals number, right? Your MBOs include company goals, don't they? They should.
No.
They should.
No.
Yeah.
I think Monique's right, though. It breaks down along the life cycle relationship with the target. So if it's a new business, if it's a new customer, you're going to overweigh your hunter salesperson, and you might kick the sales engineering team a bone on the back end. It could be a flat thing or it could be a percentage thing. And then your retention is still some there, but you're going to step in your account team. And then your growth is going to be a balance between kind of you're not going to grow unless you're growing off success. That happens very little, right? So when success happens and these programs expand and grow, what you're really doing is what you should be doing is thanking the teams that are generating the value of growth. And growth usually comes from, some kind of services insight, some kind of consistency of delivery, some kind of high quality of program and product. The fact that you've realized you've achieved the expectations you set, right? That's all about your capability of your delivery team. That's where I think you need to sprinkle it around. It feels like we've moved into the future forward model. But today, we don't do any of that. We, of course, compensate the person that sold the deal, and we give a nominal compensation to the account team for keeping it. And when it expands, we bring the original salesperson back in, and he or she closes the upsells.
I think Monique's going exactly what you're talking about. I would simply ask for the exercise. All right. We have all the permutations, but everybody here has said, I need a simple comp package, for everybody to play. Right. And so if I'm talking to somebody on a phone call right now, or somebody who's listening to our program, these are a lot of great theories. Just tell me how I take $10,000 and get my people to do more of what I want them to do. And I know that's overly simplistic, but that's what the sales rep wants. The sales rep wants to say, I get what for doing what. And by the way, the sales engineer wants to know that, and the delivery person wants to know, and et cetera.
Yeah. So I think the simplification, because I'm all about simplify, right? Simplification of the whole thing is this. You get compensated for playing nice in the sandbox. You're part of the team. You act like you're part of the team. You're not a lone wolf. And you play nice in the sandbox. Everybody wins. That's the company goal. Let's agree that everybody gets compensated on a sliding scale. If the company does Y, if the company does X, then if the company does Z, if the company does whatever, everybody gets a portion of that performance based on the company-wide sales objectives, revenue objectives, however you want to define them. That is part of your comp. How much of it? That's up to you. We'll get to that in a minute. The other one is individual performance. What's on you? What is only on Tom, only on Tiffany, only on Mark? That is your personal, individual comp plan for which you must sell widgets, services, whatever. Therefore, you are compensated for lone wolf activity, but you are also compensated if Susie down the street, down the corridor, does something great and she brings in a $2 million revenue deal, you get something for that. So you play nice with her too. Voila.
Does the source of the lead matter in how you comp?
So I think it does, but then again, that will complexify your simplicity situation, right?
And I think it also depends on what type of a business you're in. Tom, I think it's hard to answer the question on how do you divvy it up, because it's all in the details. It's all in the details of what particular type of business, how much service is required, how fast customers turn, and the main goals of the organization. I agree with Monique though on it's nice to have some type of an overall goal so that people feel that they're part of something bigger and know that they need to participate in that. And then they know also exactly what they need to do to whether it's number of subscribers or certain revenues, certain gross margin hits, certain new customers coming in. I think all of those things just depends on the industry and the sale.
So if we take what's been said, and I think there's a lot of great stuff that's been said, I really heard Monique say, look, and you came back with it as well, which is, okay, look, organization, those are MBOs. Those are the big numbers for the organization. Then there's another set of numbers on unique deals. If to the degree that you can take a team and you can say, okay, there's an attribution of bringing that on, and maybe that's a bonus size deal rather than a commission structure. And then there is the first person who took the qualified lead, right? Not just the suspect, but the qualified lead, and moved it forward in the sales process to the point we started to assemble a team. So I'm hearing three of those things. I'm curious, is that best of practice now, or is that forward looking for the future?
I mean, this is going on now. The MBO split between company-wide goals and individual goals is going on now. How they do the attribution and the qualification of what that means, that's where the is hitting the proverbial fan, because it's not clear, it's not clean, it's not simple. Like Tiffany's point is well taken. It needs to be easily explainable, and the salespeople need to be able to articulate it. If they can't, you've got a problem.
I would say I use MBOs actually as sales compensation when I have a product or service that isn't well understood. So I basically will you'll take a level of compensation that is attractive for the type of buyer, for someone who's selling to the type of buyer that's appropriate for the solution. So that kind of tells you, do I need this person or do I need this person, right? That gives you the range. I figure out the right level. I figure out what an effective compensation or a kind of a mid-tier, like median level compensation is for that plan. And I'll basically say, okay, we're going to go and do either 50 to 70% of that is base salary. And then the rest is quarterly MBOs based on hitting certain ticks. And those ticks aren't necessarily, those milestones aren't necessarily attributed directly to closing deals, because it's impossible to put that on. And it's one of those deals where you could either starve them or you could pay them wildly more than they are ever going to deserve at the same time. So there's kind of a balance. So until you figure out enough statistical data that says this is what good performance looks like, I tend to use MBOs that way for salespeople. They kind of like it. They kind of hate it. It's, you're not going to get your big home run years that way, but you're also not going to starve to death either.
So how do you use your base salary compensation is an overall, about how much of their overall total comp is base?
For that scenario, the base is going to be somewhere between 50 and 70%. What I'm basically looking for there is I'm looking for someone who is going to do what I or the organization tells them to do from an execution perspective and figure out a market. So we're figuring out a buyer. We're figuring out the value of the delivery. We're figuring out, like, you're in the process of figuring it out. Like we had my company had an influencer marketing. It was a tech platform, but it was an influencer marketing. Well, they call it the creator economy now, but it was basically, it was like LinkedIn for influencers. So if you're like somebody that blogs about X, Y, and Z, or you're a creator around lifestyle stuff or brands or food and bev or travel, we had all these influencers together collaborating, and then brands could come to them and say, hey, we want somebody to do a campaign on X, Y, and Z. So this was the lunatic fringe at the time of marketing. So we're trying to figure it out. We don't know how, and I need somebody to manage the campaigns, and someone's got to reach out to the brands, and other people are reaching out to the influencers. So all these things going on. And I'm like, oh my God, how do I put this together? So what we wound up just doing was just putting together MBO plans for the revenue generators. And it worked out pretty well. And, we've since moved from that to, more of a percentage commission once you get it. But that's how we'd apply that kind of thing.
Now, I'm going to take this to Tiffany. And Tiffany, you work in let's just say in the health space, the pharma space, the whatever kind of space, where you're moving things through a cycle time, where you're trying to figure out how, where do I go? It's the issue. We did a U.S. labor statistics Forrester Gartner analysis, and what it came back to is that all the areas that are not complex, the sales jobs are falling away, and the comp jobs are becoming completely static. And it's only in the high volume, high complexity where there's an increase in sales labor and there's an increase in sales compensation. And why is that? It's simple. It's what Mark just said. You come from a world where there's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of, it's almost endurance that's required to get through there. What are your thoughts?
So I would agree that when you've got some of these very complex deals in a complex science area, that it is really difficult. And I think you've got to continually boil it down to starting with something and then keep tweaking it and tweaking it, because and that's why I said I don't know if you ever get comp right. I think you can get close to having a good comp plan, and then you've got to continually look at it and decide. I can't remember, Mark and Monique, I think both of you were talking about what part different people play in the sale, and then what that means for compensation, and what percent of somebody's comp is going to be at risk. So typically, salespeople have much more at risk than someone in marketing or someone in service. And usually that's because either they like that type of an arrangement, it just makes more sense based on what they're doing. So all of those factors need to be part of that plan, because if you get the plan wrong, you're in trouble as a company, because either you're paying out way too much or you're not paying enough, and you're going to get turnover, and you're going to get things that happen and fights within the team. And that whole thing kind of starts to unravel, because there are no secrets in comp plans.
Fun fact. All right. And I'll throw this out to the panel. What is the average life expectancy inside of a corporation between $10 million and $250 million in size? Okay. So we've defined it closely. What's the life expectancy of a sales compensation plan before it gets changed?
I think that almost every year you're going to tweak something. And you probably should, because your product is a little bit different. It's at a different stage. I don't know if you want to do wild changes every year. That's pretty difficult on people. But I think that you should.
No, I understand that you're talking about the desirable. I'm telling you about what it is. I know the number. Okay. So, but I'm waiting to find out your number is a year or less without significant, and then there's significant changes that occur.
Mine is a year to relook and decide if you need significant changes.
Mark, yours is somewhere between 9 and 12 hours.
I'd like to say that's true. It definitely gets scrutinized. Certainly annually is without a doubt. An annual basis when you might get what you try not to do is the complexity here is you're dealing with very long sales cycles, and pulling the rug out from someone, again, going back to owner guilt versus owner greed, is a really challenging thing, because you're building your pipeline, you're managing your deals. So that's kind of the keel on the ship of sales compensation, is a long sales cycle. I think we'll look at, like, I'll do things via fiat during the game. Like, if something is just off, someone's either, I haven't clipped anyone yet in terms of someone who's got some runaway comp going. I would, I guess, if I thought it was wildly inappropriate, but I have brought people in and thrown some money at people that needed it along the way. So I would say annual for sure, and then every 90 days, 180 days, just based on where we've gotten it wrong.
And you're basically going to throw in, it sounds to me, kind of like you said, by fiat, you're going to say, I'm going to write this particular set of circumstances. I'm going to make it, I'm going to throw cash at somebody, a discretionary situational bonus.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create belief. Again, it's kind of go back to the emotional thing we talked about earlier. I'm trying to create belief in the program, belief in the company, belief in the system, that you can come there and make some jack out of it. And, a lot of people haven't had that experience in emerging, like we're, $100 million scale business. So we're an emerging large company, but we've, been a small company for a while.
It's very interesting. At that size company, you can do that. There has to be a belief that if I do well, and above and beyond, and the comp plan won't recognize that, I trust that this company will still take care of me, or will recognize me in something other than birthday cake. So your issue is I've got one-offs along the way that I have to do by fiat. I've got annual comp plans that I work with, and so maybe there's a margin of variation of 10 to 15% inside of a year.
I think I've just shot myself in the foot, because now every time somebody feels like they've been shorted, that what's on my team, if they're actually listening to this podcast, I don't want to hear shit about this from you people. So
it was for the podcast, for God's sake. But so I think this is a good segue onto what is working, right? And I think to encapsulate what you guys have all said in different ways is what is working is ownership of what the KPIs or the goals or the objectives are. And is it believable? Is it trust? Can you have trust around it? Do you have a sense of it being possible? So the phone call I was just on before was a client of mine who was in a sub $50 million business. And, he worked at 3M before he worked at this small company. And he told me, in October, we'd submit our key account plans and with realistic goals on every account and why and how and whatever. And then by February, they'd get it sent back down, and it would be completely different and completely disconnected to what was either realistic or possible. So what he said to me, the reason I love working for this privately held, it's an aerospace supplier company, is because we sit down and hash out what's possible, and then we own it, and we come up with the BHAG together. I mean, it's a stretch, but he said it's based in reality, not based in some sort of fantasy. So that's what's working, is getting the salespeople in the room.
I'm starting to not trust this panel. I asked a numeric question. What is the average lifespan of a sales compensation plan?
I thought we already covered that. I don't think anybody, these guys covered it. What do we need?
I wanted you to freaking answer it. You haven't answered it. Just give a number of months.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I haven't done a comp plan in years. I haven't done a sales comp plan in years. If you ask me, I would tweak it every quarter if I was doing it.
sounds just like a marketer. No appreciation for sales commission.
All right, so we're going to go back to what's working towards the future, and then we got to quickly get into this idea of life balance compensation. Here's the answer. Pre-Y2K, all right, it was between 19 and 21 months. Sales compensation plans averaged out at that. Where we are right now is 13 to 15 months, all right? So there's been a huge shift. I'm just going to call it post-technology wall, all right? The Y2K, and we'll just use that as kind of a false place. But the dramatic change in compensation and the likelihood in companies that are between 10 million, let's just say for the sake of math, it's between 50 and 100 million, but let's put the top end at 100 million, has a lot more discretionary comp that's given because of the issues of trust that you'll be recognized, a lot more discretionary comp. Applied bonus, a good team, whatever. There's more of that inside of those companies. I think it's because they still have owners and founders who can do that rather than highly matrixed organizations where there's more challenge.
I would say possibly it's because you're in a growth industry and it's very hard to be able to predict, especially when you're smaller and you're scaling up. And so it's harder to predict. You want to make sure you keep your good people. And that could be part of it too. I've seen that.
You got to watch your HR people and your personnel. And I'm saying this, I want to be very careful about how I say that, because it's the issue is that when you have HR, lawyers, and personnel driving the growth of your business by setting standards that are inside of an org chart, they're not driving performance. They're dealing with an issue of risk. Their issue on risk is appropriately managed, but cannot be the driver of choices that you make in your sales compensation. There has to be a balance that favors growth and keeps you out of prison.
Safety tip. Brought to you by Sales.
That's right. Really, exactly. All right, Monique, we're going towards the future. You had the idea of forward-looking compensation. Tell me about that.
Well, I don't know that it's that forward looking. I think, a lot of the time it's common goddamn sense. I mean, seriously, like treat people be realistic about, if you're going to have some salesperson buy off on the numbers, they've got to be part of the conversation, for Christ's sake, right? Because they're closer to the customer than, the ivory tower. Again, it depends on the size of the business. At the enterprise level, they're not invited to that room. They're being given that number, and working with very high level enterprise technology companies who I know the sales and marketing people who are being given these numbers, they are completely disconnected because they're being told sell strategically, long-term, long-tail sales, higher bundled offerings, blah, 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 blah. But meanwhile, their compensation plans are on freaking bandwidth. So if they don't sell X number of bandwidth gigabytes in a month, they can't feed their families. So this is not the way it's going to work in the future. It has to be, we have to have a holistic conversation on what's possible, what's realistic, and also what's going on with our customer base. Let's talk about that for a minute, because sales plans can't be done in a vacuum. It has to be relevant to the market. What's going on in our marketplaces? If we're serving, let's say, the healthcare space, well, what's going on in the healthcare space right now? If it's, you know what I'm saying? If it's serving, let's say, the automotive manufacturers, if you're selling chips, you got to be aware of there's a supply chain issue in that sector. So are you going to layer that on top for your salespeople, or are you going to be cognizant of the fact that the market is shifting underneath them?
I think the customer dynamic is huge. I mean, you look at right now. So when we have relationships with our customers, we have big relationships with, will tend to be one of their top. Like we will be one of their more strategic marketing relationships. We'll be there with, their agency of record. We'll be there with Google in terms of on paid advertising. We'll be there with their media buys. So we're lumped into that big group of partners. Now we're the smallest of those people, but we're in there. And what I'm seeing this year is people will come to you across the board and say, we need a 10% cut in what we're going to pay you, period. And I don't care if we get the same stuff or not, we're taking 10% off the top. What does that do to your sales compensation plan, especially for people who are up for renewals or people who get paid on retention? So that's tough. I guess I'd ask the group intentionally what I would say what should work or what we should be striving towards is rewarding salespeople from where value is derived. Where is maximum value derived? So let me ask you across the process how you would weigh these 3 or 4 different stages of selling. The first one is what I would call demand generation. So it's prospecting, it's researching, it's outreach, it's connecting, it's getting that first important meeting. That's demand generation. The second stage is what I would call running the process. So you're running a process with the outcome of that process as a business case for whatever it is that you're selling. And then the third thing is we're going to call it closing in dark arts. So it's the final set of skills that get you across the finish line. So you got demand gen, run the process, closing in dark arts. Which one of those do you think derives or how do you see value being derived in those areas?
All right, here's the conversational grenade. Monique's going to think it's all about,
No, I think Tiffany should answer that question because I think she's the best one to answer that, I think.
So I think that is it the same person that you have doing those, and is it more individual or kind of as a group? I think that the value. I don't necessarily think that you can maybe place a value on those 3 different things because they are all so closely together. Because you can generate demand, but if it doesn't lead to that close, then it's really kind of, in a way, useless. And to get to the close, you have to run that process, at least from what I'm hearing you say, Mark. So I think that those 3 are part of, and maybe they're equally a part of actually getting to that end goal, which is a closed sale. Finding the person, figuring out through the process what needs to happen, and then closing the sale.
5 years from now, the majority of the sales professionals that are out there will be less than 40 years of age. You may or may not have done any of the research I had to do as part of this program and some other things. This is not going to be my father's compensation plan, all right, back in the day where he could calculate it from one point to the other, because it was the singular lone wolf world. It's not the one that we're in. How are we going to take care of that next generation? looking forward, what's this world going to be like? And maybe the millennial sales team is probably a better program overall. But can anybody give me at least, good Lord, try it, one sentence on this before we exit out?
I'd like to submit something. I think we have to fundamentally understand the portfolio careerists. We have to understand that, people today are much more comfortable and open to and participating in the portfolio career game, which, just to put a finer point on it, is I don't derive 100% of my revenues from my one gig. I have multiple gigs, multiple interests. I'm a singer over here. I'm a playwright over there. And my, daytime gig is I sell software, whatever. So we have to understand that we are not 100, companies that are hiring salespeople are not 100%. We don't have 100% of their minds. We don't have 100% of their hearts. We don't have 100% of anything. So we need to hire differently. We need to talk to them differently. We need to recruit differently. And, I have clients who give me pushback on remote work. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? What you're selling, you're in a technology-based company, you're running a technology company, and you are not comfortable with remote work? That's a problem.
Elon says, get back in the office.
I know. Okay. Well, Elon says a lot of things that I don't necessarily agree with, but that's okay.
He's not under 40.
Yeah, well, I think it's a combo, and I think the companies that are doing well, but just remember, not every job can be remote. So that is a big piece, and many jobs require collaboration that needs to be up and above a Zoom call, and what you can do on a virtual call. So I think that for those whose job is not strictly in the office, I think there's got to be really this hybrid approach. But salespeople traditionally have always been field-based, have always been remote. Some go into the office more or need to, but I also think it's, and Tom, you started it with this, which is kind of this work-life balance, compensation. What does that all mean? And I think we're all evolving down this road as it's happening real time, kind of post-COVID.
When we come back together, if we talk about this, we're getting some research assembled. I'll have some more statistics for us to deal with as far as it. But that idea of the 40 in 5 years is for some people that's very upturning. I mean, it just turns everything upside down. Mark, can you close us out on the thought?
One thing I'd throw at the work-life balance and the younger generation, I'll use a specific story that's happening right now. So the balance of the outside of the office, the hybrid work environment, and this new movement towards unlimited PTO, which is bonkers, freaking bonkers. But here's a real life story that's happening right now. We have a salesperson. Let's just call him Kyle. Kyle is currently one of my best. He is my best producer. He's unbelievably. He's bright. He is. I've worked with him very closely for a couple of years, coached and worked with him on big deals. He's done beautifully, and he's gotten paid a ton of money. He's currently spending 6 weeks in Utah doing backcountry skiing. And I know this because he's documented every day of his travails on Instagram so that I get to see it, and it rubs salt in my wounds as I'm sitting here working every day in basically an office. And while Kyle is out living his best life, and at some point he will return to that from which he is gone. But that's
Wait. Is he working during these travels and these whatever, or is he off?
I'm sure he's taking phone calls and he's working.
Wait a second. Hold on a second, old farty boy over there. Let's not get all over Kyle because he's doing ski lifts and jumps and whatever the hell is he doing. Is he making his numbers?
Yeah, I mean,
no. Is he making his numbers?
Maybe not as good as he could.
Oh, no. Is he making his? Do you see what's happening here, people?
Not this year. He did last year. Again, the problem is it's the problem with sales compensation. You can kill it 1 year, and then when you kill it, you ratchet up the bottom. So you bring the denominator up, And then the next year they don't do anything. So you have to drop the denominator and threat to fire them. So you create this seesaw where every other year, what we ought to do is it's like you have to get half of your team going up while the other half of your team's going down to balance out. But that's a different episode.
To your equivocation, your point would be the issue of one of the things I would add into that is sales cycle, right? So industry sales cycle time impacts that a little bit, actually more than a little bit. Like you said, you kill it one year. My dad always used to say the best day of your life and the worst day of your life. Best day is you close the biggest deal you ever did. Worst day is you lost your biggest prospect.
Yeah, but I think though, Mark, your example is great in that it goes to what are the millennials care about, and it's experience and time away from work. So how can that be, and like you said, the unlimited PTO. So how can that be threaded in to the job? And then, setting the expectation that whether it is a year or 3 months or monthly, kind of what some of that expectation is. But it's a new world.
Yeah, we're going to have to wrap up. Thanks, Monique, from all the way in the capital of France. Thank you from the capital of nowhere, Mark, but near the water. We're holding down the fort here in Indiana. So grateful for all of you. Thank you so much. Have a great couple of weeks. We'll see everybody.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Big Sale Illuminati podcast. If you like this episode, give us a thumbs up and let us know in the comments. Also, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. Until our next episode, best wishes on your big sales.